Hi, everybody. My name's Jon Myer. Welcome to the Jon Myer Podcast. Joining me today is cloud economist Quinn. Corey, thanks so much for joining me.
No, thank you, John. It's a pleasure to be here. Super awesome coincidence that this is the Jon Myer Podcast and your name is Jon Myer. It's like you were almost born for the job. Would have been awkward if it had been someone else's name on the front of it, but here we are.
I know. So coincidental, I just taken the Jon Myer Podcast label and I made myself Jon Myer, or vice versa, whatever it is. But I don't have to change my name. I don't have to change the podcast. And we're always doing, I can't say the same stuff, something weird, but it's labeled under Jon Myer. Thank goodness I have it back there. I can remember my name.
You joke about changing names and whatnot, but I have it on good authority that when Andy Jassy took over for Jeff Bezos, it would have been orders of magnitude easier for a bunch of hard-coded internal systems if he had just simply legally changed his name to Jeff. I don't know why he wasn't game for it.
Why did they just give him an alias for it, right?
Exactly. Andy Jeff Jassy. Why not?
That would actually work better for some of those automated systems. In fact, we're going to talk about some automated systems. So everybody, today we're going to have a little bit of fun. Corey has a set. I have a set. Thanks to Corey, I have a set. If you haven't seen it on social media, check it out. We literally have a full-on set of AWS services and cards, but unfortunately, as of today, they're outdated because there's probably more services to be had. Sorry, Corey, I had to take that from you.
No, since the start of this recording, I'm sure they've launched no fewer than 3 more, most of which can probably run containers.
You never know. Actually, we're going to talk about their services today. So today's episode is all about learning AWS and their services. By the way, this is a disclaimer. Please do not use any of this information for their certifications or exams because you might get it wrong, considering that I'm going to challenge Corey on some of the services that AWS has and what they're used for.
Excellent. I'll play that game. And you should also probably not use them too confidently sounding in work discussions. Because when I say that Route 53 is a database, which it is, it comes across as quirky and endearing. Whereas when you try and say that to someone in a job interview or to your boss when you suggest it for a problem, they look at you like you've just popped a circuit somewhere.
Actually, that should be one of the loop questions. What is Route 53? And when they say, well, I used it as a primary database for my stuff, and now they're intrigued by the bar raiser on how they used it.
Exactly. How did you disagree and commit on that one? Yeah. I disagree in commit. It's how I code. Passive aggressively. Goes well.
And have backbone, right?
Oh, yes.
All right. So,
Use
Corey,
backbone, although I think Angular was the hotness at one point, too. Now it's all React.
Bum. So, Corey, you ready to get started?
I'm always ready to make fun of AWS services. It's kind of my stock and trade.
All right, so we're going to have a little bit of fun. Corey, I have literally, I feel like I'm going to slide out on all these cards, and these are pretty cool. Huge shout out to the team, and by the way, I reach out to the team because the website doesn't exist, awsflashcards.io. How did I give you credit for it? People want these. Comment down below on how do we get a hold of you, Adrian, James, Kyle, Yin. Thanks for the cards. All right.
And I want to be clear as well. Do not play poker with AWS service cards because you can do that, win, and still go broke. In fact, especially if you win, you will lose all your money.
I'm going to die laughing already on this show. Okay. You ready, Corey? Do you want the service or do you want me to read the description? You know what? I'll give you the service.
Dealer's
and you
choice.
Tell me.
I'm easy.
All right. Don't spread that too much. Okay. You ready, Corey? Cloud9.
Cloud9. Effectively, it's AWS code spaces. It's more or less an early arrival to the idea of desktop, lives in a browser, runs on, of course, billable AWS services, so you can now do all of your coding inside of Google Chrome, which is increasingly everyone's operating system of choice. The problem, from my perspective, is that they announced it. It had a few bugs. I was looking forward to seeing them get fixed, and then it was frozen like a mosquito trapped in amber for 10 million years, and I don't see a lot of movement around it. I like the concept. I like the approach. I don't like the glacial pace of feature advancement in that space until GitHub got into it, and then suddenly, oh, wait, are we driving here? I fell asleep at the wheel again. Oops, I should probably pay more attention. That's a little unfair, but not by much.
That's
it can
very
also,
close.
of course, run containers.
That's very close to the description. AWS Cloud9 is a cloud-based integrated AWS Cloud. Wait, why are they? Okay, this is a little typo, by the way, on your card. You say AWS duplicate thing. No, all right, let me correct that one.
I'm going to lose all of these if you're expecting me to quote chapter and verse from how they're described by people trying to teach folks things. I have no idea how normal people would frame this stuff.
Yeah, it basically lets you run, write, and debug your code into a browser. And speaking of Chrome, I'll tell you what, it's the best browser operating system. You said operating system before of choice.
Surveillance platform.
It is. Okay, challenging question for you. How many tabs do you have open? Hey, this looks like a good place to jump in and talk about today's sponsor, Veeam. How would you like to own, control, and protect your data in the cloud? Are you using Salesforce? Veeam has you covered with Veeam Backup for Salesforce, backing up your Salesforce data effortlessly, whether it's on-premise or in the cloud. Honestly, why wouldn't you back up your most critical CRM data from loss or corruption? Now imagine your sales team coming in and not be able to recover all their information, their notes, their pipeline, because it's the one thing you didn't think you needed to back up. How about doing it effortlessly with Veeam Backup for Salesforce? While there are 9 reasons that you should back up your Salesforce data, how about just 2, data loss and data corruption? Veeam Backup for Salesforce eliminates the risk of you losing your data and metadata due to human error, integration, or other Salesforce data loss scenarios. Check out Veeam Backup for Salesforce today. Now, how about we get you back to that podcast? Okay, challenging question for you. How many tabs do you have open?
Right now, very easy. I have 2. One of which is for the podcast I was just on, one of which is for this, and I've closed everything else because that would be cheating otherwise.
Wow.
But usually I have hundreds of tabs open because I am a pack rat.
What are the features?
And multiple windows too, because of course I do.
One of the features they should do for Chrome is dump to text or something. Dump all your tabs to text, then I can start fresh. Instead of going to
They have extensions that do exactly that, which is in the best tradition of the open source world. Oh, patches welcome. You worry about it. We're not going to build anything like that because we don't know a good way to display ads in that part yet.
All right, next one. This one's going to be near and dear to your heart. AWS Budgets. Sorry, no pretty picture.
AWS Budget lets you set a, budget. I don't know if you're allowed to use the term itself to describe the thing, but roll with it. Where you can say, I expect that this should be under $50 a month, let's say, for something, and alert me when I hit certain thresholds on it on a particular cadence, daily, weekly, monthly, or just when you hit certain thresholds. And that's great. Somewhat recently, it's also started doing some deviation monitoring / integration with the cost anomaly detection functionality of memory serves. The problem is it's driven, of course, by the AWS billing system, which alerts on cost data a couple days after you did the thing that just completely blew the budget. It's the evolution of billing alerts.
I literally just got a budget alert this morning that I was over in one of my test environments because I'm building a workshop. I'm like, oh, shoot, got to turn that down. All right, so the definition is AWS Budgets give you the ability to set custom budgets. Look, they use budgets in the definition as well. Mm-hmm. All right, when your cost or usage exceeds or a forecast to exceed your budgeted amount. Wow, 3 budgets in that sentence.
They tried to change the definition, but they couldn't budget.
They had limited budget for changing it. All right.
Exactly.
Okay. I got it. There's got to be one. Oh, here. Oh, here we go. AWS Cost Explorer. I love the face.
It's a somewhat limited visualization tool around what factors have driven your spend over arbitrary time periods. On larger accounts, it takes an awful long time to render. It fails to do multivariate analysis super well, but it lets you filter and group upon a variety of different cost axes, be it linked account, be it region, be it service, be it usage type. It can exclude or include things like credits applied to your account. It can take a look at raw costs. It can amortize it out for things like pre-purchase agreements for reserved instances and savings plans. Mostly, it is a source of eternal sadness when you're poking through it.
So everybody, a little recap on what we're doing here. Corey Quinn and I have I always feel like I need to pronounce your full name. It just rolls off of your tongue. I don't know why.
It does. Oh, one caveat as well, since I am, of course, a cloud economist. Cost Explorer itself is free. The API for Cost Explorer costs 1 penny per query.
Okay. I could see a lot of queries happening on what you're doing.
Yes,
okay,
you can, depending on what you have linked up to it that's grabbing data. It feels like an amateurish attempt at rate limiting on some level, but, if you can make money by charging people to do it, that makes sense. I also kind of suspect it's to keep automated systems from just hammering that endpoint to death.
So they charge you money to look at your costs. That's costing you money.
To query it programmatically, yes.
Yes, query it programmatically. Everybody, just to let you know, Corey and I are working together and learning AWS through the AWS cards. It's AWS Flashcards, by the way. He's got a set, I got a set. Where I'm challenging Corey on what these are. He does not know what I've picked. Not at all. And in fact, I could roll through all these cards and pick some of them for him. We're just talking about AWS Cost Explorer, and it's an easy-to-use interface that lets you visualize, understand, and manage your AWS costs and usage over time. And I'm just only reading the first sentence because we don't have time to read all of it.
I would not call it easy to use. But again, that's why I will never get the wording precise on these.
Well, I knew you would get a kick out of the easy-to-use part. All right. Here's a good one. AWS Trusted Advisor.
Plausible advisor, more like it. It's a series of checks that look across the various pillars of the well-architected framework, as best I can tell. That's the alignment they're going for, and figure out which things you can do in your account that it sees when it refreshes the analysis. To get the full suite of checks, you have to pay a minimum of $100 a month per account in support, which means business tier or higher. And at that point, then they start unlocking things like how to save money on it. Their cost analysis is particularly laughable. It tells me that I can save a grand total of, I think, $70 by turning off an idle instance and then then right-sizing that same instance I just turned off, and then buying a savings plan or reserved instance for that thing that I just turned off to save the money. Then they add all those things together. Welcome to AWS Budget Land. And from my understanding, an awful lot of their recommendations along other axes are equally unhelpful because I never see customers talking about it in any meaningful sense. They've gated themselves with a paywall, and then once you get through that paywall and you start using it, the recommendations are largely crap. But I'm betting that's not what the card says.
I think I'm very intrigued by the definition is that short, by the way, on the card. There's two. I don't understand the top and the bottom part. It says an online resource to help you reduce costs, increase performance, improve security by optimizing your AWS environment. The other sentence is the definition, I guess, says Trusted Advisor provides real-time guidance to help you provision your resources following AWS best practices. Well-architected review.
I strongly push back on the real-time analysis aspect of it. It takes at least a few days after you make changes and then refresh the checks for it to start seeing it.
Near real time? All right.
Real-ish time? Yeah.
Oh, no. Okay. Oh, I found it. Oh my God, I'm getting a kick out of these. I just sent your response. S3 Glacier.
Not to be confused with Glacier, which was originally a service. Then, we're going to make that a storage class for S3. The goal being that you can use this for archival purposes. Now, they've recently expanded it to instant retrieval, which just means that you wind up storing this data for less money. And then when you retrieve it, it's there instantly, as opposed to traditional Glacier and, of course, Glacier Deep Archive, in which case retrieving data is usually measured with a calendar rather than a stopwatch. Now, you can be sarcastically mean to your customers and have that spinning dial on the web page go on for 12 hours, but usually most people don't. It's great for audit approaches, and the deep archive component of it is terrific if you never wanted to have to delete anything ever again. That works out to $1,000 a month per petabyte, which is basically who cares money.
I don't think they should put cost on these cards at all. They can put durability, 11 nines of durability. But it says customers.
Every AWS service, with the exception of every S3 storage class, has 11 nines of durability. except the no longer used and mostly deprecated reduced redundancy storage, which had 3. Even infrequent access 1 zone in a single availability zone still has 11 nines of durability because disaster recovery metrics do not factor into that durability figure.
Well, that's actually interesting because it says customers can store data for as little as 0.004 per gigabyte per month as cost savings. And it's a secure, durable. You got it right on the thing. Secure, durable, and extremely low-cost cloud service for data archiving and long-term backup.
Yeah, I don't believe Deep Archive is anywhere near that expensive, but I'd have to check. That would be cheating. That's why you don't put cost on these things. One price update, and suddenly you don't have a story anymore.
Yeah, I don't think so. There's a little bit of feedback, and in fact, you can put this into your enhancement request. Leave cost out of it. Cost changes so frequently. Durability is actually usually around forever. All right, your next one. Dun, dun, dun. AWS IAM.
The service that AWS laments they didn't find a way to charge for directly. Identity and access management. Are you allowed to do a thing? Yes or no. Default deny across the board, as opposed to Azure, which is, sure, seems plausible. Why not? Effectively, now, assuming we're not including the service formerly known as AWS SSO, but it effectively is a way of controlling access requests for humans, for other accounts, for services. What is allowed to operate on certain resources with certain actions? It's basically a checkbox wonderland, usually expressed as either YAML or as JSON, because people are sad all the time.
And so, wait, I saw SSO in here. So this is why cards are.
It technically might not speak YAML directly, but most of the tools I work with do translate back and forth because no one is happy.
No one's happy which one they're using. And you are very correct, as IAM feature for your AWS account, offered at no additional charge. You'll be only charged for the use of other AWS services by your users. Well, that's an interesting ad for it. Enables you to manage AWS services and resources security. Wow. So, Corey, I'm looking at like 3, 4, 6 of them you got right. It's very tough to stump you.
The real fun is start making them up and seeing if I call it out or not.
Well, I'd have to get a fake card and make up a service, and you'd be like,
exactly. And who has time for that?
Infinite Dash. I could have got a card for that. Damn it, there should be a card for it. All right. Dun, dun, dun. You knew I couldn't resist this one. Your famous AWS Route 53.
It's a database. They're going to say it's a DNS service. They're wrong. It's a database. Curiously, the last 2 in a row, IAM and Route 53 are the only 2 services that AWS has that I'm aware of with a 100% SLA. Route 53's is public. IAM's is implicit because, realistically, if security stops working, you don't have a cloud anymore.
Does most of it, why does it seem like, I know IAM is supposed to be global, but I know in US East 1, that usually has a hiccup. Global, does it ever have an issue? I have not seen one, to be clear. And they wind up having differentiation. They talk about this in their regional durability white paper that came out late last year or earlier this year. Time is a fleeting thing. And they talk explicitly about how control plane and data plane are separated. So when US East 1 had problems, Route 53's, when US East 1 has problems, S3 had trouble provisioning new buckets, but you could still use existing buckets in other regions. When Route 53 was impaired, creating and managing zones was a problem, but existing zones would still resolve and return data for as long as, in some cases, that they would age out not gracefully, but it would work. Whereas making changes to things when US East 1 is having trouble means you might not be going to space today. All right. So Blue Origin, here we come. Amazon Route 53 is a highly available database. No, I'm sorry. Domain name server. I couldn't resist. Web service. It's designed to give developers and business extreme reliability, cost-effective way to route end users to the internet. I noticed that on
that's DNS. I mean, that there is nothing differentiating there between that and any other DNS provider that is at significant scale.
Except this
Take out the highly available and durable part, and that's your local DNS server, too, if you want to spin one of those up.
I actually tried. I did one of those. It's nice to manage locally, but a pain in the butt.
It does 2 things, too. It's a resolver, and it's also an authoritative server for zones that are delegated to it.
Can you use Route 53 externally and internally for AWS? like internal resolution? All right, just check.
You can do split view / split horizon DNS resolution with it as well. There are also private only zones. You can have a public and a private zone for the same thing. Depending on where you come from, you get different results when querying it. Since everyone loves to talk about cost on these cards, I'm surprised I didn't mention it there. Lookups are generally free if it's to an alias record for an AWS service and charge per million or billion. I forget the exact numerical breakdown on that publicly. Usually, if Route 53 is a significant cost driver, there's something else going on. Not that it doesn't get somewhat expensive, but to do that, you're usually getting other things to be really expensive.
I did notice that on both of these, you hinted that they're the only two that have 100% uptime.
Mm-hmm. 100% SLAs.
Oh,
There's
SLA.
An explicit public SLA of 100%
SLA.
for Route 53 on the data layer. And they don't make an explicit public SLA statement for IAM, of which I'm aware, but it goes down for 5 seconds a year is still going to cause widespread and massive disruption.
All right. I have to
Now, uptime is just a question of how successful has a thing been.
All right, my next one. We're going to do a couple more because I'm having too much fun challenging you on some of these. Though you are getting them all right according to the cards, or at least you're a little off on the definition on the back, but that's all right. We can skate around.
Yeah, I don't speak marketing.
All right, AWS Outpost.
Yes, it solves a age-old problem where you have workloads that you want to run on premises, but can't figure out a way to do it that doesn't include paying AWS by the hour for it. So what this is a rack that they ship out to you that they stuff chock full of servers, historically. They have small 1 and 2U server options, also called Outposts, because that's confusing, that run a subset of AWS services. They do need to be connected to a region. Things start going wonky if they're disconnected for too long. But they are effectively a way of broadening AWS into your very own home. Not quite accurate. You do need a loading dock and enterprise support. I've checked.
Wait a second. Have you tried to get one delivered to your house?
Yes. I'm not prepared to pay the $180,000 a year enterprise support fee for this.
So if there wasn't,
I can fake a loading dock. That's the easy part.
So if there wasn't a 180,000 enterprise thing, you'd have one at your house?
Oh, absolutely. But now to do that, I basically have to hijack a truck, and who has that kind of energy?
Say energy, say money. Did you see the reason? Before I read the definition, did you see the recent release that happened 2 days ago for the AWS modular data center?
It's basically an outpost that can be dropped from orbit onto something. Yeah, in other words, it's a military-grade equivalent of Outpost meets Snowball Edge devices, and of course is yet another entry in the pantheon of AWS services that can be used to run containers.
Well, speaking of that, it ships in a container.
Oh, it absolutely does. It also ships, to my understanding, along with a few paratroopers.
It does, though. I think it's dubbed AWS MDC. I'm thinking they missed the mark on here. It should be AWS MC for MC in your data center. That's just me.
That's more you than it is me.
All right, so AWS Outposts brings native AWS services and infrastructure and operating modules to virtually any data center.
And pricing.
And co-location space on premise. Seamless hire. AWS removes the complexity of hybrid cloud.
Spoiler, it does not. It just modifies some of that complexity.
I knew you were going to get that. Oh, wait. I got 2 cards. Wait. I got 2 Outpost cards. Is there a second Outpost?
They say the same thing on your side? Well, they have 2 implementations of it. One is the rack and one is the small individual box services.
They're the same. Runs. Yep.
Ah.
Hybrid. Hey, I got double the pleasure here. All right. Oh no, those are not 2. Okay, wait, I had another one. What about Amazon Virtual Private Cloud?
Yes. It's a networking abstraction that effectively lets you define a series of subnets with particular addressing in an AWS-style environment. Once upon a time, everything was just public and had a public floating IP and could theoretically talk to almost anything else in the bad old days. Now that was called EC2 Classic, which was then put out to pasture, yada, yada. Now it is effectively the networking equivalent of your data center in the cloud, which is a great way to think about things if you want to effectively worsen your cloud experience to improve your data center experience. For some folks, that's a fair trade. I consider it more of a transitional step, but context is always going to be king. By default, it does not cost anything directly. But there are ways to fix that.
I have to touch on that because I know I dropped you a note probably a month ago. I started seeing in my Cost Usage Explorer, VPC was part of it.
Yes, there will be charges under the umbrella of VPC, specifically for endpoint hours, for managed NAT gateways, for unattached elastic IP addresses, for data transfer in a few different arcane ways, and a few other pieces here and there, but I don't recall offhand all the different charge codes.
Why wouldn't they break that out into those individual items and not group it under VPC? It's kind of a misnomer.
Where else would you put it? Oh, they put VPN charges in there as well. Otherwise, you wind up with them scattered to all four winds. There's no rhyme or reason to where they put things on the AWS bill. They used to have a miscellaneous category that for some reason they like to call EC2 Other.
What did they group in
That's
there?
where managed NAT gateway charges show up.
I'm missing that card. I know that would have been a good one, but I mean, it got too many services to find out that card. All right. So Amazon Virtual Private Cloud, also known as VPC, lets you provision a logical isolated selection of AWS Cloud where you can launch AWS research. There's a lot of AWS in this definition. Okay. And virtual, that you define.
Someone gets paid by the word.
Well, there's a lot of words on the back of this. All right, everybody, real quick, I just want a quick recap. Corey Quinn is giving his best knowledge and definition of AWS services. Now, he's very close. He has rounded out, we'll just say about 10 of them. We're going to do about 5 more before we wrap things up. This is fun and humorous. And I think I'm going to bring these the next time Corey and I are together. I'm going to pull them out and be like, all right, Corey, what's this? And we're going to see and challenge him. I hope to find some of you at the event. I'll give you the deck and you pull it out and you ask Corey, what is this server? You're going to be amazed at some of the things he said. All right, Corey, you ready for the next few?
Hit me with it.
Oh, AWS Managed Services.
AWS
I love your facial reactions.
Specifically to compete against that class of company that will go ahead and manage and run your AWS environment for you. It's a team of people that will curate a subset of AWS services because even AWS themselves doesn't want to be responsible for the full gamut. And they, to my understanding, are more of a longer-term, ongoing maintenance approach than AWS ProServe. It's a little weird to think of that in the context of being an AWS service because it's more of an AWS team and an offering built around humans rather than computers, which is a bit off the beaten path. And every time I see AMS as an acronym, I think someone flipped a glyph somewhere.
I gotcha. Hey, well, you know what? It actually worked out pretty good because AWS Managed Services provides ongoing management of your AWS infrastructure so you can focus on your applications. All right, we're going to do 4 more. I'm just having too much fun like figuring out. Oh, AWS CloudFront.
It's a CDN built from first principles, and usually it was an exercise in teaching customers patience because you could update a CloudFront distribution that would scatter to all 4 corners of the world in more time than it would take to hit one of those cities with a ballistic missile. It was basically go out to lunch, come back, and find out that you screwed up a character somewhere, try it again. Functionally, it acts as getting your content closer to where end users are. It's also, of course, a service you need if you want to have a website served out of an S3 bucket with a custom domain. It's a treasure and a joy. Picture Cloudflare if it were worse, and you're pretty close.
I know the pain that you mentioned. I've deployed it out a bunch of times. Noticed that the images and stuff were very stale. You go and void all.
You have to do a manual cache invalidation.
Yeah, so you do like an asterisk and it just clears it all or whatever. But you have to wait like 30 minutes to an hour, and then you got to check. And if you check too soon or check too quick, you'd see the old
They've
images.
recently had some significant performance improvements as far as updates go, but it's still frustrating when doing a Lambda Edge function, for example, to wait for the deploy to go through and populate over before you can test the thing. So iterative development in that sense just becomes annoying.
AWS CloudFront is a fast content delivery network, CDN, that securely delivers data, video, application, and APIs to customers globally with low latency, high transfer speeds, all within a developer-friendly environment.
That's developer-friendly.
I knew you'd like that. Oh, man.
This didn't try and claim it was low cost because the cost is variable depending upon where the requests are coming from. Where your customer's sitting, that will impact what it costs per gigabyte to deliver content to them via CloudFront. It somehow makes AWS's usurious egress pricing even less deterministic.
I found the card for AWS SSO. Does that still exist?
Ah. It does, just renamed. AWS IAM Access Identity Center, because someone is paid by the word. It's a federation approach for humans to get somewhat temporary credentials into an environment, either in the console or as environment variables you can stuff into things. It replaces the idea of long-lived IAM creds that people get careless with in the fullness of time. It winds up working across multiple accounts simultaneously within an organization. You can wind up having a different source of truth for the identity aspect of it. Most people use Okta or something like that. And then it spits out accounts and roles within those accounts that you can assume it's for humans, not for programmatic interaction. Those instead should be using role assumption or instance-based execution roles or something similar to that in that vein. And the advent of IAM Anywhere, somewhat recently, means all you need to get an IAM role assigned to something is a SSL certificate signed by the correct CA.
Do you want to know? Look at the back of this card. Do you want to know how many times SSO appears?
I'm guessing they didn't do it singly.
12 times. 12 times SSO appeared. That's a lot of SSO.
The documentation for the service, even before and after the rename, is garbage. You have to basically stumble your way through setting it up the first time to really understand it, and then the light goes on. But that's some gnarly brambles you're wading through beforehand.
Speaking of the light goes on, I'm laughing before I show you. I'm sorry. Amazon Chime.
Okay, Amazon Chime divides into two things, and people misconstrue it. The Amazon Chime SDK is a communications SDK platform for video, chat, etc. It is what Slack uses under the hood for its video calling, for example. And that service is awesome. Then you have Amazon Chime, the desktop application that nobody likes. And everyone says that it's awful, terrible, etc. But it makes more sense when you realize for what it is, which is fundamentally a testbed application for the Chime SDK. It is the one saving grace that application has, and I will give it credit for this. 1 minute before your scheduled call, it calls you to join the bridge. It doesn't mean you can't be passive-aggressively late to a meeting. You just have to be a little bit more proactive about that.
I actually missed that. That was one of the things where I liked it that it called me for any meetings that it would happen. And I use Chime to chat with various Amazonians. But Amazon Chime is a communication service that transforms online meetings with a secure, easy-to-use application that you can trust.
It transforms online meetings? Is that what it says?
Transforms online meetings.
I would not accuse it of doing that.
With a secure, easy-to-use application that you can trust.
Well, it has almost no features, so easy to use could mean that there are no buttons to click, so that's nice.
Okay, 1, 2, 3. I threw SSO as an extra one. 2 more. All right, 2 more, Corey, and we'll wrap things up. I'm just having too much fun at this. AWS Lambda.
What was the line I used in my first issue of the newsletter? Mary had a little Lambda S3 at source of truth, and every time that Lambda ran, her bill went through the roof. Yeah, it effectively is write code, package it up these days via container, but once upon a time with this custom arcane interface that required manual zipping of files and the rest. And it turns into an event-based architecture. When a thing happens, be it the passing of time that fires off an event bridge rule, an HTTP request, et cetera, it runs the code on whatever input it has been given and then does whatever that code says to do. It has some constraints around it that have been expanded over time. Now it's up to 15-minute maximum possible runtime, which is an innovative solution to the halting problem, I will say. How do we know this loop will terminate? Well, after 15 minutes, it will terminate. The end. A very Gordian knot style approach solution that we're taking there. It also has constraints as far as the amount of RAM you can allocate to it, 10 gigs, last I checked. And CPU power, n number of vCPUs scale linearly with RAM allocated. So if you want it to run faster, give it more RAM. Not the most intuitive thing in the world, but there you have it. Used to have /temp limited to 512 megabytes. Now you can get ephemeral storage attached for up to 10 gigs on that. And the rest of the file system is read-only. So if your application isn't expecting that, expect tears before bedtime. Have I nailed the salient points?
You're very close on the definition. I'm going to give this one to you as a point. You haven't missed a single one. AWS Lambda lets you run code without provisioning or managing servers. You pay for only the compute time you consume. There's no charge when your code is not running. That's a clear definition. All right. One
You're
more.
not even charged for the storage of the idle function code, which is power to them. That means every account has up to 75 gigs of free storage, so you can build a database out of that sucker.
There's some tips that you've come across that you've highlighted for everybody on how to use or get some additional storage. I like that. I'm trying to find... Well, this is an old one. I haven't heard of that one. Wait, didn't we do... Oh, no. Oh, we're going to do this one. This is a good one. I'm finding the one I'm going to get the most kick out of, pretty much. All right. So, as a cloud economist, Corey, I know you'll probably get this one correct, but just in case you don't, I have a secondary card that will pop up in just in case. It is AWS Cost and Usage Report.
Oh, Christ. These are the long-form AWS billing data. It lands in S3. You pay for storage. You can request it in multiple formats. Very often, if you want to do something even slightly useful with it, you'll use something like Glue or another ETL process to wind up transforming them, Athena being an obvious target, but there are many others. And it winds up giving you an hour-by-hour, resource-by-resource, deep dive breakdown into a sarcastic amount of information regarding the AWS bill. Fun tip, they are never actually finalized. There can be changes made to cost and usage reports after the month has ended and the new one has begun. In fact, back several months, there are occasionally changes just to keep us all on our toes. It is the most complete and thorough billing data available publicly to AWS customers.
Oh, you're right on to it. The AWS Cost and Usage Report, also known as what, Corey?
The CUR.
All right. Lists AWS usage for each service category used by account and its IAM users in hourly or daily line items. By the way, there is hourly costs associated with it, so just note there's always a cost of that, as well as tags that you have activated for cost allocation purposes. Well, Corey, you are 20 for 20.
One tad bit on that is the cost allocation. Let's be clear. The cost allocation tags need to be enabled. And once that is done, those tags are visible going forward. They do not show up retroactively. So you have to figure out what fun questions finance is going to ask you about the bill 6 months from now and start allocating a tagging strategy for cost allocation tags that will be responsive to those requests. Does it sound like a pain in the ass? That's because it is.
Hey, so what you're saying is tags are important.
Yeah, so now that you can have 50 tags per resource, it can also be, that's right, a database.
But not every resource accepts tagging, though, correct?
The list of resources that are not taggable gets smaller all the time. I don't recall the last time there was a generally available service that was launched that did not support tagging, but there's been an effort to go back and retroactively fix some of the lack of ability to tag on creative resources. Some used to be you'd create the resource and then you'd have to make a separate call to tag them. It's been a bit of a mixed bag.
Way back then when I originally started out in AWS, tagging was important. Not all services accepted. And I think we had 10 tags per each one. I had a developer who created his own tagging system and tagging application to go back and tag all the services being utilized. There was actually some open source stuff like, Tag Monkey that went around and kind of tagged any of those resources. Very critical, time consuming, but very important when you want to allocate things and reduce stuff, not only security through service control policies, but like Corey mentioned, through the cost and usage report.
Somewhat recently, in the last few years, you can use tag-based access control, which I thought was a recipe for disaster, but those predictions have not come to pass much, which is, hey, I like being wrong in the right direction. It is also worth mentioning that they have use that goes beyond just cost. I like to tag data based upon its applicability to various compliance controls. Is this HIPAA-controlled data? Is this PII? What is the sensitivity of this? And people can start making policies and controls based upon that as well. Also, let's face it, humans are never going to tag things effectively. It requires rote adherence to doctrine and a lot of busy work. Computers have to do it. People do the good citizen efforts, although now there's a lot of flow that winds up doing this automatically. You're going to tag the EC2 instance. Good for you, gold star. Did you remember to also tag the elastic IP address you attached to it, the EBS volume backing it, the snapshots of those EBS volumes, the data that winds up getting spat out of that, and of course the entries that show up in CloudTrail and in CloudWatch logs from those applications running on those things. How do you wind up attributing those things back? And it becomes a dizzying rat's nest nightmare very quickly.
Even the data that you house within S3 and the classifications of it, tagging that for, not only usage later, but archiving as well. I mean, tagging is critical.
Lifecycle policies can take effect based upon tagging as well.
Yeah, actually, so I did a course on that, and I talked about DLM and how important it was to tag your instances, only for the simple fact is that you can do lifecycle policies based off of tags. No tag, no lifecycle policy, which actually translated back to the snapshots. Automation is key because what will happen is you'll spell something with a lowercase, I'll spell it with an uppercase, and you might spell it one way, I might spell it another way, and it's just like prod versus production. And you have to do it automated so that it's spelled the same way everywhere and that you tag it throughout the entire life cycle of the application or service.
Yeah, you need something automatic that's going to wind up addressing that. And for fun, just because people sometimes get surprised by this at scale, every API in AWS, including the tagging API, has rate limits. So if you're running something across 10,000 resources, build a queue and then drain that queue. Don't just run a shell script in a loop and then wonder why everything exploded.
Wonder why it all stopped. Corey, I have cards galore all over my desk. This is a huge mess. So, Corey, before I wrap things up, I want to share with everybody, we got something awesome coming up in Seattle here the second week of March, first week. We're doing something awesome with Chief Evangelist Jeff Barr, also Stephen Barr. We're going to do a sit-down recording at Jeff's house. Are you looking forward to this?
I am too. I'm assuming, just for sake of argument here, that Jeff has absolutely no idea we're coming. It's going to be half podcast video recording, half bungled home invasion, from my understanding of it. So giddy up. I'm here for it.
We're going to show up knocking on this door. Jeff, we're here.
Can Jeff come out and play?
That's what you do. Though, I heard he has a pizza oven, so I think we're going to dive into some of that home-style pizza, sit on and chat. We're going to look at his recording setup.
It's a testament to Jeff and his reputation and just what a nice person he is that I will eat food that he prepares for me. There are very few AWS VPs that I will give a straight shot to poisoning me. So, yeah, Jeff is a real one.
So this is the first time and the only time, and I hope you have all your documents updated.
Oh, yeah. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it.
I love that pause right there. All right, Corey, this has been awesome. Thank you so I'm going to die laughing. All right. This has been awesome. Thank you so much for doing this with me and running through the AWS services from this awesome book and flashcards provided by AWSFlashcards.io. Adrian, James, Kyle, Yin, thanks for sending me these. We're going to have a lot more fun with them in the future, by the way.
Oh, I expect so. It'll be the world's saddest tarot card reading, if nothing else.
Bum.
Wind up doing the layout, the spread, look at all the services, and oh no, your startup is going to die. Yeah. Almost doesn't matter what the cards say.
I have another idea. Okay, so you just set me up for another idea that we're going to do with these cards next time around. In fact, I might bring them with me. And I might lay down. All right, I'm not going to spoil it. We're going to have a lot of fun. I'm bringing this to Seattle.
I'll see you there.
All right, everybody. Corey Quinn, Cloud Economist. Corey, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me. It's always a pleasure to indulge my love affair with the sound of my own voice.
Well, I'm glad you enjoy it. Everybody, my name's Jon Myer. Don't forget to hit that like, subscribe, and notify because guess what? We're out of there.